Hey, Ben Hansen, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. It's been a long time.
Yeah,
Of course, we've been in contact in many other ways. Unfortunately, with our good friend Lee Spiegel, we sort of connected back then. I still miss him. I watched that James Fox video the other day, and his picture came up at the end because James dedicated the film to him.
He worked on that for a bit, didn't he?
That's right. And but it's like I still miss Lee.
Lee was interesting because he used to call me sometimes weekly until he got married. But when I first got married, my wife set a time limit to talk to Lee because she said, who are you talking to? It's Lee, honey. And she's like, tell him you got to put the kids to bed, like you get an hour with him. He just used to love to chat and chat. He'd call you on the subway.
You could have a 4-hour conversation with him. It wouldn't be unusual.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, when he passed away, Lorraine said, thank you guys. So I had a break.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
So,
And they just didn't talk to us for quite a while. He didn't want to tell anyone that he was sick. And
I know.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
I know. I tried to reach him. Yeah. But anyway, that's kind of a sad note to start off on. But anyway, it's great to have you back on again.
Thank you.
And you are one of the busiest people I know in this field. I mean, and many times that we've talked, you just said, oh, I'm just so slammed. And do you still find it exciting? And I mean, a lot of times when a passion goes to more like work, it makes things a little tougher. And I'm just
I think what people don't realize is most people, I think, are working in this. It's like, I'd call it a side hobby, right? Unless you're retired and you have all the time you want and money's, not of any consequence and you can just do that.
Yeah.
But I have 4 kids and I have like 2 or 3 day jobs. So when you see me on the news or things like that, that's completely voluntary, right? It's only when we're doing a TV show that I have to put those other things aside and use that also to pay the bills. Yeah. So when I pick up the UFO subject and get my other work done, there's only a certain amount of time that we can put into that, right? Because the news will call you and they'll say, hey, what do you think about the Vatican? What are they? I'm like, I haven't heard about the Vatican. Got to get up to speed. And so it does keep me very busy, but I obviously do it because so much is happening right now. It's happening so quickly that I am passionate about it. And whatever my part is in it, I want to stay in the game. You know?
I have to, even though you said this on one of my shows a long time ago, I used it as a soundbite in my opening for a number of years. But if you would just briefly, I know, in some type of nutshell, talk about your grandfather's words at the end and how that all came about.
Yeah, sure. So he was first he was infantry, Army, Marine infantry, World War II, and then he retired in about, I think, 52. We're just now learning that he actually started work with the Air Force, civilian Air Force, a few years earlier. My dad didn't know. And at any rate, he worked at Hill Air Force Base in Utah for, I think, 30-something years. And he didn't have a degree. He was a very intelligent innovator, though. And he became known as the problem guy. You go to him, he'll fix it. He was very skilled with his hands and was able to have some specialties. One of them was fixing hangar systems. We learned that he maintained the hydraulics that they played the shell game like in World War II or actually the Cold War, where they didn't want satellites to see how many aircraft you have at a base, because you can bring them into a hangar, but then you can stack them on top of each other. You can bring them down different levels.
Wow.
Right. So they never really knew how many they had. So anyways, he had a specialty in a lot of those things. And about 1963, he came to my dad, who was the oldest, and told him, hey, I've been called to be part of a special team that has to be called at a moment's notice. And I can't tell you where I'm going sometimes or when I'll be back. And he ended up leaving in about 65, 64 for these temporary duty assignments, which we know a lot of them were at Wright-Patterson. So long story short, many of those, we know exact dates when he was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad felt like it was some sort of emergency team that he hinted at. He's like, well, it's something like nuclear, but different. And so when he'd get a call in the middle of the night, he'd have to leave the next day, not reachable by phone. That caused some problems with my dad because my grandma was dying at the time. And so all of this kind of my dad held in, kind of resented that my grandpa was, or my grandpa, he wasn't around. And so he had cancer. 1996 is when he passed. And as he progressed through the chemo and everything, they started watching TV shows together, like Unsolved Mysteries. And he would sit back and he'd watch with my dad, and we were really obviously into the subject. I'd say, Dad, you were there. You were there at Wright-Patterson. You know, did you ever hear anything about this? And usually just kind of chuckle, you know, and just kind of change the subject. But he started saying like, that's interesting. It was kind of his way, we think, of telling us. And then other parts he'd say, oh, this is ridiculous. That's crazy. I knew Philip Corso and he was there. What, you knew this guy? So there he is, end of his life on his deathbed. And my dad had been asking him forever, what does this mean, Dad? Like, Ben and I really want to know. And at one point, before he went to the hospital, he got up, they were in the gym, and he said, I think it's time we leave, because they were having a great time, and he got very stern. And they didn't talk about it again until he was on his deathbed. And without prompting, he was going in and out of lucidity, and he reached over, he squeezed my dad's hand, and suddenly his eyes were open. He was talking clearly, and he said, son, I know what you've been asking me. And he said, you need to know that we're not alone. And don't be afraid, take care of your mother.
Wow.
And then he passed. And my dad is certain he wasn't talking about the afterlife. He wasn't saying, hey, there's life after, because he already believed that. Yeah. He had a near-death experience in the war.
Oh.
So this was about whoever they are.
Yeah.
And I think I keep telling people he never told us what he knew, but it seems as if he was in a position to know, because that would be the most horrible joke to pull on your son, right? Absolutely. Before you die. It's like, I know something you don't know. You know, bye. You know?
Yeah.
He was trying to let him know by keeping his oath. He knew enough of something, right? That there was more to it, and don't be surprised.
Isn't that something? And, you know, the question, maybe I bring it up too much, but I often think that whatever our government does know is not the full picture. And therefore, how could they protect us from something they don't know enough about? And as you know, just by what's progressed since the last time we talked, which has been quite a bit of things have happened, but, where's the Air Force on all this stuff? You think the Air Force is protecting our skies. And the Navy's I think the Navy's done an excellent job, with the reporting and all that. But it's kind of weird to see the Air Force.
It's odd that they really haven't been called to the carpet.
Yeah.
Like we've seen the others, and they should be probably the lead agency, you would think, lead department in all of this, because of the history with Blue Book and Wright-Patterson, and yet I've been told, behind the scenes, that there are videos that exist. We've heard Representative Burchett talk about the same thing. There's videos that exist that are Air Force videos, right, of things flying around our F-22s and stuff that make it look like child's play.
Right.
And it doesn't surprise me, but you're right. I think that the people who are the spokespeople, right, the PRs, those that come forward, I think it's possible they very well could be telling the truth, because why would you even read them in on something if they then had to keep a secret they might slip up on? Right. So instead of starting to call people liars and you're covering up, like, let's just step back and say, maybe that is the truth to what they know.
Yeah. Compartmentalized.
Right.
Yeah. Type of situation. And, that's, I spoke with a FB at the MUFON event last year. I sat for hours and spoke to a retired FBI agent. And I know you were in the FBI at one time. and he was saying, the problem with 9/11 was with the stovepiping, all the compartmentalizing, and nobody knowing the whole picture. And I imagine that would basically be the same, except with not such urgency, of the information.
It's a disease, to be honest. Take a look at just what happened with the it wasn't obviously New Jersey alone, but the drone incursions.
Oh, I know.
Right?
Still ongoing, by the way, and nobody's talking about it.
No, it's faded from view for now until it happens again en masse. But the thing that when you have other agencies coming out and publicly saying, help us, do you know what this is? Or we've had to shut down an air base, several air bases because of this. We've had to move assets.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, if it's ours, at very minimal, we have a big communications problem in the IC.
Absolutely.
Right? If they're not talking to each other and they don't know what the other hand's doing, that's a big problem. Right. And that's what happened before 9/11. They weren't talking to each other.
That's exactly right. And, the ahead of time, I know this, that the FAA said they didn't know what was going on. And then it comes out, the FAA announced that, they had licenses
carefully worded.
Carefully worded.
It was acknowledged that these were authorized flights for research and among other things, and other things.
Incursions included. Which is absolutely crazy. So one of the things that I see happen, it must kind of irritate you because you have no control over it, is, and I know I've heard them say when they announce you, like on News Nation, or maybe not News Nation, but some other channel or something, they'll say UFO expert Ben Hansen and UFO expert Nick Pope, and
we don't like that word.
And it's like, no, don't say that. And I know you don't want to say that because no one's a UFO expert.
You could be a historian. You could know a lot about the history of it, but an expert would be an expert mechanic, maybe someone who can fix things. We can't fix this right now. So far there's no accredited, I know of, degrees that you can get in ufology. So maybe that would make you an expert in the knowledge of it. But it's not. You could say someone's an expert investigator. Right. But it is kind of frustrating because these labels that the news or others will throw on you, and then people expect you to have the answers. And if we're humble and we are being truthful, it's like the more you learn, it feels like sometimes the less you really know what's going on. It's incredible.
I think so. I say that as a joke. Here I am 660 some odd episodes in, and I don't know any more than I did, but I love the puzzle. That's why I stay with it. And it kind of baffles me that, mainstream media and not really, people like News Nation, they at least take a look at it all the time there, and kudos to them. And I know their viewership went way up because of that. And so I don't understand.
Segment. It's an underserved segment.
Yes, absolutely.
They need mainstream to look at that. Right? We don't want to be on the fringe. We don't want to be only looking at entertainment shows. We need the media to cover the UFO hearings, not just stuff on Capitol Hill, but the whistleblowers. We need that information to be able to decide for ourselves. Right. Is this bunk? Is this a hoaxer? Is there disinformation? Or can we trust this guy who says that he had access? And if no one's reporting on it, it's not possible.
Now, I don't remember for sure, but I think I saw you interviewed about the supposed Las Vegas giant aliens.
Yes.
Okay. So there's some people, I get a lot of email from people. There's some people that email me that say, there's really something to this. Don't ignore it, blah, blah, blah. What is your honest conclusion?
Are you talking about the backyard aliens or the giant one? Oh, because I'm thinking of the Miami one, the mall. When you say giant aliens, there was that one too.
Yeah. But I think it was tall, the ones in Las Vegas, the backyard.
Yes, the backyard aliens. Yeah. So when that first broke, we did some analysis on videos and stuff that came out, and then we revisited it. And I had a local guy. So one of the guys on my team was former Las Vegas Metro, and he went and tried to contact the family. went by the house and gathered information and stuff. And where do I stand on that? I'm not insinuating that the family had done any type of hoax. They seem genuine. From the people I know that talk to them, seem very genuine. I think they were genuinely scared. I'm also not saying that they completely blew things out of proportion, but knowing what we know about witnesses, you had two things going on. You did have, I think pretty well established, my opinion, a meteor that lit up the sky. It was caught on multiple cameras.
Right.
You hear an actual sonic boom. Mm-hmm. Right, in someone's backyard cam. The organizations that track these things, feel pretty confident they know where it eventually kind of the area went down. You don't always find them. So the skeptics are, skeptics, but those conspiracy theorists were like, well, you never found one. We often don't find these things going down.
It's like a needle in a haystack.
It is.
And
did it completely dissolve once it got close? We don't know. But you had that happen, and coincidentally, they get this call, right? I'm going to say, if I had to put money on it, I bet you none of that came down in their backyard. I bet you that there was a lot of commotion.
Yeah.
It probably lit up the sky where they were. Maybe they heard the sonic boom. There was some confusion. They go outside. That's where it gets fuzzy.
Yeah.
Because they claim that these things, one was sitting in their backhoe trailer. There was a haze in the backyard. They saw faces, so they take their cameras. And this is where I have to say, if that's all we have, you then have the second story revisited. They now are saying that maybe it wasn't alien. It was maybe more paranormal.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Yeah.
Yeah, they had this kind of slant on it. Maybe it was interdimensional, that it could have been some sort of like more of a haunting sort of thing. So I don't know. The danger, though, is when then people take the one video, like we've been accused of relying on the smoking gun video, but the others who want to believe so badly risk their reputations as experts to come in and draw lines around amorphous pixels, right? And that's, I was on News Nation with that as well, because we have an animator who is very good, and he's on our team, who builds animations in 3D modeling. And he showed how the lighting from the flashlight of these guys going into the fence easily explains how that kind of shadow appears behind the fence. So you just have to ask yourself, is it more likely there was an 8-foot alien hiding behind the fence?
Yeah.
And as they go through, it suddenly disappears, or is it likely that this is shadows?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I know, your interest, at least what you've been involved in some of the shows that you're on, actually does, when you mentioned the word haunting, I thought, oh yeah, you've done some work when it comes to what people think as poltergeists or things like that. But the question I have in all that, do you think there's any relationship between UFOs and possible hauntings? And I remember you probably knew of Paul Eno. Did you? I don't know. He was on the radio for many years on this topic in Rhode Island. But he thought they were all related, and he thought they were all interdimensional. I mean, it's an interesting theory, but I'm just asking you, do you think they're related in any type of way?
I think we have to be open to that. People are kind of always looking for the unified theory.
Yeah.
Right. So take, for example, Bigfoot. Right.
Yeah.
I have talked to so many people I feel are very credible, who believe they've seen this face to face. Unmistakable. You could be 30 feet and say that this is not a guy in a suit.
Yeah.
Right. And I have to say there's something to it. But for me, you're also going to be hard to convince me that in some of these locations, even deserts and places like that, that he's undiscovered, that some hunter just hasn't shot one, right? That it's just a, bipedal, hominid that has lived for all these millennia. I think it's more likely, as crazy as it is, that sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. So I'm open to the possibility of interdimensionality between that. If you want to throw the paranormal into it with spirits, there's got to be another realm there. So why not extraterrestrial? I think people make too many conclusions. Well, we should basically still be sitting back in the bleachers and be like, let's look at the whole field. Like, we don't really know what's going on. It could come from there. We could have travelers actually in structured craft, nuts and bolts, coming from far away, using another physics. I'm saying another, but one we don't understand, right? To travel through whatever bending space and time, quantum physics, and they could be here.
Yes.
Right. So it could overlap.
Right. So a lot has happened. I can't remember. I think it's been 3 or 4 years since you've been on the show. I think so.
Oh, wow.
The way time is flying. A lot's happened in that time. And how do you think things are going overall? Do you feel like, you've been at this a lot longer than I've been doing the show since 2011, and I get real excited about some things, and then like that, it's like the back and forth, 2 steps forward, 1 back type of situation. Do you feel like the needle is moving at this point?
I do, and people might hate me for this because the book I'm trying to write, I'd say it's sort of a cautionary tale. And I don't want people to misunderstand me, because I'm all for it, just like everyone else. I want disclosure, right? But I don't have an agenda to tell people they need to release it all right now or whatever, because what I'm researching is it needs to be done right. We only get one shot at this.
Yeah.
So I personally don't think there's a formalized, structured plan within the government, because no offense, government.
It's pretty obvious.
They know that they mess up big things. Like, just look at COVID, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people scrambling. I've heard there's a couple think tank groups who, if they're in the know, they're trying to figure out how to do this. I would say, I believe we live in the most wonderful country in the world that has our best interests primarily in mind. And with that kind of, I guess, faith that most people are trying to do the right thing, if they're in possession of this knowledge, it's pretty much like they know it's going to come out at some point without them doing anything. So how do we do it and having some control over it, so that we don't have people keep using the term catastrophic disclosure?
Right.
I think it's much more nuanced than that. And my master's was in emergency disaster management. So I'm a professional crisis manager, and I'm trying to let the world know, like, look, we got to look at a few things, help the government help themselves, so we can do this right. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. So I'm not pushing for rip off the Band-Aid. I'm also not pushing for a drip over the next 25 years. There's got to be a happy medium where we can help most people assimilate to what's going to come out.
Right. And when it comes to national security, I can understand why they have to, not give the full picture on some things, because this type of knowledge would be very powerful, for one, and and it's also could be used to make a power play with adversaries in some type of way, or could be used against us in the same way from another country. That being said, it's almost like egocentric or something, like it's always about the United States. But I'm wondering what you think about if other countries had about the same knowledge we do. Do we share with other countries? What do you? And I'm asking
to a
for
limited
opinion.
extent. I know, like, after the Cold War, there's some back channels probably between, let's say, Russia and the United States comparing notes. Probably even with China, we're probably kind of talking with them about, well, what do you think? Because as humanity, that's one thing that President Reagan always said, imagine if there's a threat from out there, right? Yeah. That could be one unifying factor for us all.
Right.
Like, how do we deal with this problem or this opportunity? So I do think there's some talk going on. I don't know if there's an accord, where it's like, who's going to make the announcement? But I know the U.S. has their hand just about everywhere.
I know they show up, but you talk with someone like James Fox about the Varginha incident in Brazil, and they showed up there. Yeah. And you hear it all the time, and they show up quickly.
And it seems like they defer to the U.S. and just like, well, whether it's aid that we're providing their country, we threaten to do something else, but they don't seem to be much of a fight. If we're collecting this from them as well, they know that kind of we are the center of collection, you know, so it's hard to say, you know, if one of these countries might go rogue and just say, forget it, we're going to make the announcement.
Yes.
Right. And that I think would be a big fear.
That would be, I would think.
You know?
I don't know if you ever followed any part of, there's only been 2 interviews, 3 total. And I was lucky enough to do 2 of them with a gentleman named Jonathan Wygant. He had a Peru incident in 1997.
I do remember
so, but I mean, the thing about that is, you know, he shows up, he climbs up this ledge, he sees the craft wedged into the rock with fluid coming out, changing colors, a bizarre story. And then an arm hanging out, like a bluish arm hanging out, and feeling like he's getting a telepathy, like he thinks the thing is dying. And then all of a sudden these guys, and Mike Herrera talks about a very similar thing, you know, later, that these guys show up in black fatigues with American weapons. And Jonathan claims that his conclusion, Jonathan, whoever anyone thinks about Jonathan's, he's highly intelligent. And I know that because I've had hours-long conversations with him. He thinks they were from the Department of Energy, and I wanted to get your opinion. What would you think about that? He said they had American weapons, they were American, and black camo.
I can't remember if it was his case or one of the others where they suspected that these were private aerospace. They're obviously former operators, you know, with different units that then go work for private aerospace because of the deal they have where it's not their first rodeo. And the precision they come in and do that to take control over it. And then you're also siloed away from the FOIA, the oversight, and everything, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, having it within the DOE, they're very expert at taking control of sensitive materials and handling it whenever they transport a warhead, right? So that makes sense. But if you're trying to keep it out of the purview of the official structure, it makes sense also to have a third party do it.
Now, speaking of that, you know, we had come close to the Schumer rounds bill where there was like eminent domain if there was any, you know, into private entities, and they would be fined if they didn't reply and all that stuff. And then, of course, you know, there's a lot of money and power in these corporations and things change quickly when it comes to any type of threat like that. But do you think that it was a step too far, the eminent domain? Like, we need this material from you.
I'm sure you know the backstory to that, right? So when I was talking to Travis Taylor, and he was presenting, Jay Stratton was actually presenting as well. He kind of filled in. He said, look, I personally didn't ask Brandon Fugel about it, but the 3 of them were kind of the push, supposedly, to not support the Schumer bill because of the eminent domain part, where if you have a place like Skinwalker Ranch and you find something on it, they're worried that that material or craft or whatever would then become the property of the government. I think they were fully in favor of everything else, but they may have been a large part of the lobbying and the impetus to get them to end that. Then, of course, you have representatives who are in places like Ohio, you know, that were against it because of the aerospace connections.
Yes.
That's the other, I wouldn't call it a conspiracy, but if they had skin in the game, and they're kind of telling them, hey, look, like, if we did have something, let's say we did have materials, we don't want the government just to come in and take control over it. So who knows? It seems like a no-brainer. You know, that you would put that in, it would get passed. But if they got rid of it, would it have passed? Maybe they should try it and see what happens.
I understand it might be tried again. So hopefully it will. I know we both have something going on, and this is kind of a short interview, but I feel like I could talk to you for another few hours. But
I'm so sorry I cut it short. I was
that's all right.
Lecturing here a little bit later at the conference. So
So thanks so much. It's been a pleasure, and hope to have you back again.
Thanks, Martin.
Great to see you.
You too.